You want to figure out something that you're doing with your life that's worth not getting drunk and screwing up, because that's fun. Okay, so why stop? Well, you do stupid things when you're drunk. You hurt yourself, you compromise your health. It's really hard on the people around you. You tend to turn into a liar, and it screws up your life. It's like, yeah, but it's pretty fun. Yeah, well, it is, but you need something better than that. And what's better isn't being straight and not making mistakes. It's like, that's all prohibition in some sense. What's better is, no, you need an adventure, man. You need to get out there and have something to do and something worth waking up for. And that's the substitute for the addiction. Actually, the addiction is the substitute for that, if truth be known. So the question is, why do people pursue rewards that don't produce this resonance? They don't have a value hierarchy. So Pleasure Island, it's a good example. Those kids that were brought there were lost. So they didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have an identity. So they default to local pleasure. And that's better than none. Although the problem with local pleasure, well, as the narrative made clear, is that you better look out if you're impulsive, because it's going to kick back on you hard. And the reason is, you're only considering the immediate time frame. And the problem is that things propagate across all the time frames. And so just because something works really well this second, cocaine, for example, doesn't mean that it's a tenable solution to the class of all problems. So often people pursue local pleasure because that's the best they can imagine. It's the best they've been taught. They don't see another alternative. So it can be ignorance. It can be they don't want to adopt the responsibility, because part of the problem with working at every level of the hierarchy simultaneously is that it's like dancing to a very complex waltz, let's say. You have to be paying attention to a very large number of things simultaneously and doing things right. It requires responsibility. And so, it's a pain. It's a weight. Part of the reason people drink alcohol is to get rid of their responsibility. I mean, that's, you hear people drink because they have problems. It's like, yeah, no. Some people drink because they're anxious, and alcoholics drink because they're in withdrawal. But young people drink because they're sick and tired of being responsible, because it's annoying. It's like, so I'll drink enough, I won't care about the medium to long-term consequences, because alcohol, that's exactly what alcohol does. It doesn't make you ignorant of the medium to long-term consequences, but it makes you not care about them. And partly it's because it dampens anxiety. So it dampens anxiety, leaves your positive emotion circuits intact, so then you can go out there and do stupid fun things. And that's a party, really. Let's go do stupid fun things. That's a party. But the medium to long-term consequences it's risky. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's risky. So, yeah, they don't know better. That's the answer, I would say. So, yes.
Imagine that you have children who have a certain low-level amount of neurological trouble when they're infants. So something's gone wrong, maybe a little oxygen deprivation at birth, something like that. Something's gone a little bit wrong with their neurological development. Assuming that the damage isn't too severe, those children will stabilize and normalize if they have at least one well put together role model in their life. And so one of the things that you do if you want to inspire others is get your act together, because you inspire most through example. It's much more powerful than words. Words are very powerful if they're also accompanied by example. But the best thing you can do is start putting things together around you. There's plenty of things to put together. It's a good meditative exercise, and I think this is the proper form of prayer, let's say, assuming that there is such a thing. A proper form of prayer would be, if you're not happy with your life, if you're miserable, you sit on the edge of your bed and you think, is there anything I can change in what I'm doing that is going to make this less awful than it has to be, less awful than it might be? And you have to ask that, with intent. And generally speaking, you'll get an answer almost immediately. There's something that you could put right that day that would make things slightly better than they are. And that's rule 4, which is compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. I don't believe that there's a person who exists who wouldn't receive an answer to that question if they genuinely asked it. And it's no different really than thinking. Like if you think you have a problem, you think, you get an answer. Might not be the right answer, but obviously you get an answer. And you might think, well, I thought up that answer. It's like, well, that's really not much of an explanation because you don't know how you think. It's like I'm sitting there and thoughts appear in my head and that's how I think. It's like, that's a pretty shallow explanation. It's not much different than revelation. It's like you ask yourself the proper questions, you'll get the proper answers. If you ask the right question and you want the answers, right? And those are not easy preconditions to set up because who knows, you know, if you're sitting on the edge of your bed thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong? That's a hell of a question to ask, you know, because if you really want to know, you'll find out. And then you'll find out that you really didn't want to know. Because generally speaking, finding out what you're doing wrong is not a pleasant experience, and it means that you have to sacrifice part of yourself. Usually a burned out, stupid, bitter, corrupt, arrogant, nasty, vengeful part of yourself, but nonetheless part that you like. And so you can, I think that room for those incremental improvements exists within everyone's grasp. And I think that it's a humble thing to do, to ask how you could improve incrementally without interfering with anyone else, like it's your problem, not theirs. But I think that the consequences of maintained incremental improvement are anything but incremental. You get compound interest on incremental improvement. You know, there's another rule in the New Testament called the Matthew principle. Economists use it, and the rule is, to those who have everything, more will be given. And from those who have nothing, everything will be taken. It's actually a description of the way the world works, interestingly enough. You know that if you've ever played Monopoly, because that's what happens if you play Monopoly. And there's a reason for that, that's a deep reason. And it's a very harsh rule, because it means as you start to wander off the path, let's say, the probability that you will wander further off the path increases non-linearly. And that's a terrible thing to know. As you wander towards the edge, the probability that you'll fall off the cliff increases. And that's a statistical justification for the concept of hell. But as you improve, the probability that each improvement will produce a further improvement increases. And so perhaps the downside is the cataclysmic catastrophe that you can engage upon if you reproduce your moral failings, but the upside is that each improvement produces an increment in the probability of the next improvement.